The following program is being brought to you on the Voice America Business Channel. For more information about our network and to check out additional show hosts and topics of interest, please visit voiceamericabusiness.com. The Voice America Talk Radio Network is the worldwide leader in live Internet talk radio. Visit voiceamerica.com. The views and ideas expressed on the following program are strictly those of the hosts or guests and do not necessarily reflect the views and ideas held by the Voice America Talk Radio Network, its staff, and management.
In the past few years, we've heard the term free agents and been told we would all need to become one in order to succeed. The recent economic structures have helped to promote this concept as reality. Where do we get the tools to take control of our career path in the present and future? Welcome to The Career Confidant with your host, Marie Zimenoff. Marie and her guest experts are here to provide you with the tools you need to move forward and achieve your career goals. Now, here is Marie Zimenoff.
Good afternoon and welcome to The Career Confidant. This is Marie Zimenoff. And if you've been joining us on the show, you know that we're here to give you the tools and resources that you need to move your career forward and take control of your career direction. And we have had a run of amazing guests on the show, and today will be no different. Today we welcome Rhonda Onstead, who is a career practitioner as well as a master of social work. And I love Rhonda's bio. It says she's committed to using career development to transform lives, communities, and the world. And if you've been listening to the show for very long, you know that I agree with her and am on the same mission. So Rhonda, thank you so much for coming on to the show.
It is my pleasure to be here, Marie. Thank you for inviting me.
Yes, and your business, you run a private practice called Be the Change Career Consulting. And so this topic that we're going to be talking about today, which is international development, sounds like it fits perfectly with the type of work that you do. So I'm so excited to have you as an expert in this field to talk about international development. So start off a little bit and tell us what international development is as a profession.
Sure. So international development or global development, the terms are kind of used interchangeably. It's basically agencies and activities that are designed to pull people out of poverty, people living in developing countries, and basically increasing their quality of life, health, social opportunities, fighting oppression, that type of work. And development generally refers to organizations and agencies that are specifically focused on doing that. And so this includes a lot of projects like building wells, helping farmers be more productive, but it also can refer to relief work and humanitarian aid, helping people in disasters or wars or refugees. And so it really is working with the most vulnerable section of society and really focusing on making their lives better. International development as a field kind of refers to the aid component of it. And so that's what makes it different from general nonprofits and other types of agencies, is that it's funded through international aid, World Bank, United Nations, as well as, like USAID and government agencies. And so, in some ways it's similar to nonprofit work, but there's some complexity in the funding mechanisms that enable people to do this type of work. And so I think that, there's, like I said, there's a lot of overlap so that, what is needed in the private sector as far as accounting and administration and all of that is also needed in international development. But there's also specialized skills as far as, gender specialists, agronomists, economists, people who really understand the logistics of delivering relief, for example, those are some things that are pretty specified to the international development field. But you also need to be able to understand the complexities and the bureaucracies of how funding is given. And I think that is kind of the main difference from other sectors, is that level of complexity about how they get their money.
Okay, and so if somebody wants to work into this field, what are some of the challenges that they face, or how do they get into this field of development?
Yeah, I think so. Obviously, people who want to get into international development, there's generally a really big desire to make a difference, right? And so a lot of people will get into the field or want to get into the field because they have a cause. They want to make life better, like for children refugees, or for women in developing countries, or for farmers, or for street kids. And so a lot of times that's where they'll start, is looking at the organizations that are doing the type of work that they really want to be involved in. And so one of the challenges is that the expectation of the work that you'll be doing doesn't often meet the reality of it. And so the people who want to break into the field really need to do their research. And and this is common in pretty much all job searching strategies, but it needs to be, kind of taken up a notch with international development. And I think it's really important to research in two areas. And the first one is really yourself. Like, self-knowledge is something that's very underutilized in international development, but it is really, really important. Like, you need to know not only your skills, but also your personality, your preferences, the type of life that you want to live, because international development is a really demanding field. And if there is a mismatch between your working style, your cognitive style, your personality, what you enjoy doing on a daily basis, then you're not going to be really good at your job or suffer from burnout. So that's a challenge once you get into it, that I really work with my clients to help them avoid that as they're moving into the field. And so again, really starting with an understanding of who you are and the type of work that you want to do, and then do that research into the actual field. And so look at the organizations that are doing the type of work that you want to do, so the cause that you believe in, and then getting an understanding of what the day-to-day jobs are really like. And for example, a lot of the work is very administration heavy because, as I mentioned, these funding mechanisms require a lot of paperwork. And so if you're a person who really wants to work with refugee kids, you might not really be interested in writing reports and monitoring budgets. And if that's what you do day in and day out, you're not going to be able to make the impact that you really want to make in the world. And so there are the jobs that are more hands-on and people-oriented. And so it's really important to know if that's something that you need, then you've got to really do your research and do your networking so that you're able to find those jobs, because they're few and far between and they're pretty competitive. And in fact, development overall is a really competitive field. And so once you've done your research, then networking is the most successful way of getting into development. And again, that's true for most jobs, but for development, you have to realize that the organizations are pretty risk adverse. They want to really know that you're going to succeed because they don't have a lot of money, and training and replacing people is really expensive. And so they really rely on employee referrals to fill a lot of their open positions. And so
when we talk about some of these things, it's similar to the nonprofit world, right, where you may need to volunteer or do something to get your foot in the door and to become known within that industry, right? I mean, especially going from the corporate world and thinking you're going to step into one of these jobs, they're not necessarily as hot on that idea as a corporate person might think they should be, right?
Exactly. And I mean, the other big piece of this, which is pretty obvious, is the international experience. And so a lot of people do break into the field by doing international volunteering opportunities like Peace Corps. And that is a really effective way, because again, then you demonstrate commitment, you demonstrate your ability to work with people of different cultures and to work in developing countries. Those things are pretty crucial for most jobs. And then it also gives you a really strong network of people once you do that. Now, if you don't have 2 years that you want to commit to, living overseas and doing a volunteer job like Peace Corps, there are other ways of networking and getting into the field, but you have to be pretty creative and you have to be very intentional about it. These types of jobs don't fall into people's laps. And obviously, it can be a lot easier to do this type of work if you live in Washington, D.C. or New York or London or Geneva. But, I think that there's some really interesting networking opportunities now through LinkedIn and organizations like devex.com that can really help link you to other people who are doing this kind of work and figuring out the role that you can play.
Sure. And so when we're talking about this type of work, it's one of those kind of you have to jump in with both feet and really be willing to make the commitment to get there because it is competitive. It requires a specific skill set. And my guess is that it's not a lucrative career field, especially when people are just getting into it. Right.
Yeah. I mean, this is certainly not the industry to get into if you want to get rich. I mean, you can certainly have lucrative consultancies, and it doesn't mean that you're going to be a starving artist, but it really is for people who are dedicated to making a difference and who have a lot of patience and persistence. I mean, you need that to get into the field, and you need it when you're there as well. This kind of change takes a lot, and it's, there's a lot of competing interests. And so having tolerance with bureaucracy can also be really useful, but as well as having, that idealism of doing what it takes to make lives better. The field really needs all different kinds of people because it is so complicated. And
we'll get more into that. We'll talk more about the different types of positions that you see in that field when we come back from break. So we're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back in just a few minutes.
Voice America Business Network, the bottom line in business.
You know that the career landscape has changed and that you need to be proactive about managing your career. You can have the foresight, skills, and confidence you need to take charge of your career and seize opportunities. A strategic advantage and career expert, Marie Zimenoff has helped thousands of leaders like you get focused, get found, and get hired. Visit getcareersmart.com to find out more. That's getcareersmart.com or call 800-521-2080 to schedule your complimentary consultation. Game-changing technologies and strategies are transformational, exciting, and disruptive. They shake up your status quo. They get you thinking about new ways to scale, compete, and grow. They move you in amazing new directions. You're invited to take your coffee break with Game Changers on Tuesdays at 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 p.m. Eastern for our special series on Industry Cloud Trends. Join us to learn about the next wave of industry-specific solutions moving into the cloud. Industry Cloud Trends with Game Changers, presented by SAP on the Business Channel.
The business community's first choice in Internet Talk Radio. Voice America Business Network.
You are tuned in to The Career Confidant with Marie Zimenoff. If you have a question or comment for Marie or her guest today, please call 1-866-472-5790. That's 1-866-472-5790. You may also send an email to marie@astrategicadvantage.com. Now, back to The Career Confidant.
Welcome back to the Career Confidant, and today we're talking with Rhonda Onstead about international development. So we've talked about what that field is, right? That it's people who are working internationally to help bring others out of poverty, to do social entrepreneurship, to help those who have suffering from political oppression, social oppression, dealing with health issues, education issues. So that social side of development, right? We're not talking about sales or business development here. We're talking about developing the third world, or even some of that is done here in the local US. And the Peace Corps has started doing what they call AmeriCorps, right? And they've been doing that for, I don't know, maybe even the last 10 years, sending people to local places to do development. And so there's a lot of opportunity here. And as Rhonda has been sharing, there's also a lot of competition. These are desirable jobs. And so we've been talking a little bit about how to get into these jobs. And so, Rhonda, we were talking kind of on the break, and there are a lot of different ways that people can contribute without necessarily having to work for USAID or something, the UN, right? I think sometimes we get focused on some of those huge organizations that are a little bit harder to get into.
Right. Yeah. I think the thing that is really interesting about our day and age is that there is a lot more focus on, on the lives of people everywhere. Like, we have so much information about, what's happening in, rural Africa, what's, what life is like in Indonesia. And there's a lot of organizations that are more niche, that aren't, again, global, World Bank, United Nations, USAID, but we've got a level of nonprofit organizations or non-governmental organizations, and some of these are probably names that you've heard of, like CARE, Save the Children, World Vision, organizations like that. So international non-governmental organizations, and those types of nonprofit agencies really do need, a lot of support. So if you're looking at the types of jobs that are available to someone who doesn't have a PhD in economics, then there's a lot around program and project management. This field is really project heavy. It's not so much about a presence that one agency has in one country. A place like DAI, Development Alternatives International, for example, they're working hundreds of different projects in dozens of different countries. And so there needs to be people who manage that, who manage the outcomes and the personnel, manage the budgets. And so those, if you, for example, are an accountant that is interested in being involved in a value-driven organization, then that type of skill set can be useful. And so you don't want to just narrow yourself to having necessarily these, high-level technical skills, because there are administrative needs that are really important as well. On the other hand, there are some really unique positions that you're not going to find anyplace else. And, so I'm working with a development sociologist, for example, and she is basically doing research in agricultural areas to understand how they interact with each other so that an agricultural project will have more community acceptance, for example. And for the statistically minded and the mathematically minded of the bunch, monitoring and evaluation is something that is becoming more and more crucial in the field. Understanding if projects are really making a difference and what kind of impact they actually have. So that requires people with cultural sensitivity skills so that you can interview people from different cultures, but also that statistical analysis. So there is a huge variety of jobs. And so that goes back to the research that I was talking about, understanding what you want to do, understanding what jobs match your passion and your interest and your skill set, and then looking to see what might be those gaps that you have that keep you from being able to step into that position. And the best way to really know that is to talk to people.
Yeah, and do that research that you can't do online, right?
Exactly. I think informational interviews, and I hate that word because it sounds like so staid, but it really is just building relationships, talking to people who have the same passion that you do. We in international development, we're a passionate bunch. We really want to make things better. And if you have that same interest in climate change, in women's empowerment, even really super specific, areas of expertise, again, like disaster logistics, there are people who are just as passionate about that. And so I think that the concept of networking can feel kind of sleazy. And in development, I find it to be really different. It is really establishing relationships with people who have the same interest and passion that you do. And then just taking that to one step further and, inviting them out for coffee and talking about, what are the things that are needed in that position or in that field or their organization, and getting some insight about the kind of contribution that you can make for them. And if you don't have the skills that they need, they're going to tell you, because again, they know what's needed, and they want to bring in people who can really, make that kind of contribution. So talking to people who are doing the work, that's really where you're going to, understand what's needed and also what you can do to get that type of position.
Yeah, and that research, that networking, it's not, I think people sometimes get confused about how that process works, and so they feel like they're, like you said, they're being sleazy or fooling people, and if you're doing it that way, you're doing it wrong, right? That's not what it's
Exactly.
meant to be. It's that research, talking to someone, really understanding what they do, and then as we talked about earlier in this field, a lot of it is getting involved and helping in some way. That's really how you're going to network. Right.
And, I think that's that type of approach is is useful in international development. I think it's a little trickier than in nonprofit agencies because the skill level is so specific, and there's not the same type of, like events and fundraisings that local nonprofits do. So like interning is a really good way of getting into international development. But the volunteering is more like, something like Peace Corps, for example. But that's, again, there are like communities of practice and affiliations that you can be a part of, and they don't even have to be in person. I think that LinkedIn is one of the best resources for people in international development because there's a ton of groups of people asking each other questions, and again, I've found them to be really supportive when people say, I just got my master's in development economics and I want to work for such and such an agency. What kind of advice do you have? I found that there's a really strong community of people who want to help people break in the field and give you information that's really, really useful. So that in-space networking is really important if you're able to do it. And again, in some cities, like I live right outside of Washington, D.C., and there's a ton of events that are happening every week. So here it's pretty easy. If you live in Boulder, it might not be, you might not have that same access. But by taking advantage of LinkedIn groups and organizations like DevX, then there are ways that you can find out who the players are, understand what people are doing, understand the challenges that they're facing, and then you can see if your skills and expertise can help solve some of those challenges. This is a field that is beautifully complicated and complex. There's always work to be done because there's so many different factors. And so we need the people with, sharp minds, persistence, a sense of purpose, as well as, that desire to make a difference. These are the biggest problems that we have to solve. I mean, poverty has been around for probably as long as, there's been society. And the reason why poverty persists is because the factors are interrelated and complicated. And it's a really exciting time to be a part of it because there's some new ideas that are being implemented working with technology. So there's lots of opportunities if you've got the persistence to look for them.
Perfect. So Rhonda, tell people how they can get a hold of you if they're interested in learning more about what you do and maybe more about international development jobs.
Great. Yeah. The best way to get in touch with me is through my website. So it is bethechangecareers.com. And there you'll find more about me, more about my services, resume writing, career coaching and consultation, and there's a contact form. And if you do email me through the contact form, then I'm happy to set up a 30-minute consultation to talk about what your career goals are and if career coaching might be a good option for you.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for sharing your expertise today, Rhonda.
It's been my pleasure. It's been great talking with you, Marie. Thank you so much.
Yes. And if you're listening here, don't tune out. We'll be right back. I'm going to recap some of the things that Rhonda has shared and give you some specific resources for researching more about international development jobs. So we'll be right back in just a few minutes.
the business community's first choice in Internet Talk Radio, Voice America Business Network.
You know that the career landscape has changed and that you need to be proactive about managing your career. You can have the foresight, skills, and confidence you need to take charge of your career and seize opportunities. A strategic advantage and career expert, Marie Zimenoff has helped thousands of leaders like you get focused, get found, and get hired. Visit getcareersmart.com to find out more. That's getcareersmart.com or call 800-521-2080 to schedule your complimentary consultation.
Tune in to The Soul of Enterprise, Business in the Knowledge Economy, with co-hosts Ron Baker and Ed Kless. Ron and Ed will show you how to recognize that wealth is created by intellectual capital. It's all in the possibilities that we can create and that are created for us. These possibilities are destined to be discovered by human imagination and through the service of others, creating a brighter future for all of us. The Soul of Enterprise is heard live every Friday at 1 p.m. Pacific Time, 4 p.m. Eastern on the Voice America Business Channel and simulcast at the same time on the Voice America Variety Channel.
Bob Pritchard has over 30 years of experience as a straight-talking business consultant and author working with some of the top Fortune 500 companies. Now he's come to the Voice America Business Channel to help you and your business. Tune in to the Bob Pritchard Radio Show for information about starting and successfully running a profitable business. From the movers and shakers to great marketing screw-ups, you can't afford to miss a single edition of the Bob Pritchard Radio Show. Tuesdays at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern on Voice America Business. When it comes to business, you'll find the experts here. Voice America Business Network. You are tuned in to The Career Confidant with Marie Zimenoff. If you have a question or comment for Marie or her guest today, please call 1-866-472-5790. That's 1-866-472-5790. You may also send an email to marie@astrategicadvantage.com. Now, back to The Career Confidant.
Welcome back to the Career Confidant, and today we've been talking with Rhonda Onstead about international development jobs. So those being jobs where you are involved in helping move the world forward, right? Addressing poverty, addressing oppression, and working internationally to do those things. So as Rhonda discussed, this work is like most nonprofit work, only maybe a step further, really requires you to be in the industry, to have a foot in the door, to be doing that work in some way. So whether that's an internship or some kind of volunteer work that you do with some of these organizations, that is going to be critical to get your foot in the door. Lots of people, of course, go to graduate school, do some of those things to get into this type of work. One of the neat things I think the Peace Corps has been doing more recently is you don't have to be 21 to go into the Peace Corps, right? They're taking experienced professionals and putting them on Peace Corps types of assignments. And it gives you the opportunity, if you are in your mid-career, to do this kind of work, make this kind of shift. So networking is going to be key, and obviously doing your research and really understanding what types of positions are available. And the more you can know about that so that you can focus your networking and your volunteering or whatever you're going to do, the better off you'll be. So doing that research, Rhonda talked about LinkedIn a couple of times and the importance of using LinkedIn because there are so many resources there that you can get connected with. For instance, I searched international development in the groups section of LinkedIn, and there's over 2,000 groups. All of them might not be relevant, but the first page of them looks very relevant. International Development Professionals Group, professionals that work with non-governmental organizations, NGOs, to network and share experiences and resources. So 61, almost 62,000 members in that group. Then, of course, you have jobs groups, jobs in NGOs, 50,000 members of that group. And the thing to remember is that, yes, there are people in those groups that you can connect with to do your research. And Rhonda said informational interviewing, and then she said she hates that term, and I agree with her. I hate that term. I just say career research. You're doing some career research. You'd love to talk with them about what they do. The more specific you can be and approaching people directly, the better information you'll get. If you are going to post in a group that you're looking for information or advice, please use those words: information, advice, guidance. When you start posting in those groups that you're looking for a job, does anybody have a job available? You probably will hear crickets or not very helpful information, kind of look desperate. So I'd prefer that if you're doing research in those groups, keep it in that framework, in that language, that you're doing research. You'd love advice. How did people get into that work? Versus anything asking for or saying that you're necessarily looking for a job as a general post in a group. Better, of course, to connect with people individually, do that research through those groups. You can look at members of the group and can try and connect with people that way. And also, of course, posting relevant information, asking relevant questions, and answering or commenting on posts by others are all great ways to connect with people within those groups. There's also specific organizations that have groups on LinkedIn that may have great resources off of LinkedIn. For instance, the Society for International Development, they have a LinkedIn group, and they probably also have a website where you can go and see more about that career path, the group, see if you can find members. You'll be surprised at the number of groups who have some kind of membership list or some way for you to see how to connect with those folks. Or they may just post jobs and have other resources on those types of professional development groups. A great opportunity for you to connect with people through those professional development groups. They may do conferences, they may do other things that you could get involved with to learn more about what they do. I'm sure there are many different ones, but a few of the other ones, as Rhonda had mentioned, DevX, DEVEX, DEVEX is a website that talks about development, international development jobs. So it's a place where they talk about jobs, and there's a community that you can join there and interact with, as Rhonda was talking about. So if you're interested, you would check out that one, devex.com. Also found DEVJ, so development.jobs, devj.org, which lists jobs. And again, not necessarily that you need to apply to jobs or be ready to apply to jobs to go to these sites, but it's a great way to look at the job titles. What's being posted? Which ones will fit your skill set? How can you start to narrow that down? And then to also look at company names, organization names. Who should you be targeting? Who might you not have heard of? You know, it may be to your benefit to look at other organizations, but just besides USAID and, you know, the United Nations. Those are huge and maybe more difficult to network into, whereas smaller ones may be easier. So you're doing that research even as you're looking at a job board to really understand what positions you might want to focus on and what organizations are available that you might not have heard of yet. Then, of course, you can go to usaid.gov, and they've got a careers website. So usaid.gov/careers really goes through a pretty good description of the types of people that they hire. They, of course, have videos, and you can go through their vacancy announcements. So as Rhonda said, you're first doing some kind of internal work to figure out what it is that you want to do, right? What skill sets do you bring? What do you want to offer? Whether you're starting out from school or you're an experienced professional, we're going to have to figure out exactly what do we want to target, right? Are you going to be a financial person or an HR person? All of those jobs are available in these types of organizations, and they do require some specific knowledge of the industry, just like any other industry does. And so as you're looking through these jobs, you can think about which types of jobs are going to be the best fit for your skill set. And with any career transition, we know that if you're looking to make a transition, the best way you can do that is to leverage an existing skill set versus trying to change industries and jobs, or what you do at the same time. So to go from being a CPA to being a director of a nonprofit, that's going to be a big step. To go from being a CPA to being the administrator or, chief financial person at one of these types of organizations is going to be a much easier transition, although still have some of the challenges that Rhonda and I were talking about before. But the whole idea is, when you're starting with your research, to really understand the industry, what they're looking for, the language that they use, and specifically the language that they use for the types of positions that you might be interested in, and then to start interacting in some of these communities to start your network. And as Rhonda said, there's going to be easier or more opportunities in some locations and maybe more difficult in others. However, I would say today there's probably some kind of international aid related organization or affiliated organization in almost every community. So here in Fort Collins, Colorado, for instance, it's actually the home of Peace Corps, where Peace Corps started at Colorado State University. So you may think you're in the middle of Colorado in a fairly small town. How are you going to get connected? And wouldn't you know, it's a pretty easy connection right there. Some other international nonprofits who may not necessarily be international aid, but just international nonprofits may also be a good place to start. Here again in Fort Collins, Colorado, we have an organization called Trees, Water, People, and they do international projects focused more on the environment, but might be a good place to volunteer and to get started for someone who is interested in moving into that type of work. And of course, I think the most important thing you can know about yourself and then research about these organizations are some of the practical, down-to-earth things. If you're going to like that lifestyle, if you're going to have to move, if you're going to have to travel, how much money are you going to make? What are all those things really practically going to look like? I think that we can get caught up in the fairy tale of this kind of work and forget some of the realities. And as Rhonda said, also forget some of the realities of those positions, which are just going to be like any other position at any other organization, where you have to do paperwork and you have to do the grunt work, and not everything you do is going to be mind-blowing, changing the world effective, right? It's going to require the whole picture of what a job looks like in any organization, and knowing that you're doing it for an organization with the mission that aligns with what you want to be doing. So as you're doing your research, again, looking at these websites, it's a great place to start. Really understand what they're looking for, how it aligns with what you want to do, and who these organizations are, and which ones might be the best fit. Then we can go into a place like LinkedIn and make quality connections with people who do the same things we want to do, where we can build real relationships and have real in-depth research conversations that will help build our network. So we're going to take another short break. We'll be back in just a few minutes and tie up our conversation here about international development. We'll be right back in just a few minutes.
the business community's first choice in Internet Talk Radio, Voice America Business Network.
You know that the career landscape has changed and that you need to be proactive about managing your career. You can have the foresight, skills, and confidence you need to take charge of your career and seize opportunities. A strategic advantage and career expert, Marie Zimenoff has helped thousands of leaders like you get focused, get found, and get hired. Visit getcareersmart.com to find out more. That's getcareersmart.com or call 800-521-2080 to schedule your complimentary consultation.
Today, our world is faced with complex challenges that present massive potential risks. Conflict, misunderstanding, misalignment of organizations and their leadership, lost productivity, wasted time, and wasted resources resulting from limiting perspectives, distraction, and hardline positions are damaging our today and our future. The monetary cost of such failures is in the billions. Stop wasting time. Make a shift. Engage with host David B. Savage on Breakthrough to Yes with Collaboration, Thursdays at 6 a.m. Pacific, 9 a.m. Eastern on the Voice America Business Channel.
Now you don't have to stay linked to your desktop or laptop. Take Voice America on the go and listen anywhere. Get our mobile app for iPhone, BlackBerry, or Android at the Apple iTunes App Store, BlackBerry App World, or Android Market.
You are tuned in to The Career Confidant with Marie Zimenoff. If you have a question or comment for Marie or her guest today, please call 1-866-472-5790. That's 1-866-472-5790. You may also send an email to marie@astrategicadvantage.com. Now, back to The Career Confidant.
Welcome back to The Career Confidant, and today we've been talking about international development, and that specifically being those jobs within those organizations who are focused on doing work around the world to help others, whether that's those being oppressed by political reasons or poverty or needing education or healthcare, any of those organizations that are meeting those basic human needs around the world. And so when we're thinking about this, and we had Rhonda Onstead today on the line, and as she said, please feel free to check out her organization, Be the Change Career Consulting. She works specifically with people who are trying to make this transition. And specifically to the nonprofit world, of course, is this kind of idea of volunteering. In the paid world, you might call it an internship. And that's a great way to get into any job. And unfortunately, a lot of the times those things seem more available to people who are students. So when we think about, you could go back to graduate school to get into international development, I would say, yes, that might be true. And just going back to school is not going to be the end-all be-all. Going back to school would be an opportunity for you to do some of these things we've been talking about, right? To, as a student, do some volunteer work, to, as a student, do an internship with one of these organizations. If we just go to school and take our classes and get our master's or whatever it might be, and don't take the opportunity to do any of those things, we probably won't be any closer to an international development job then than we were when we entered school. So kind of a warning there that if you're thinking about going back to school to get into this field, that can be a great opportunity, and you'll have to do the additional things during school to make that happen. So as we're going through our research process, and as I talked about, especially if you're thinking about a career transition into this field, using your existing experience is going to be very helpful. Instead of trying to leap 2 steps, leap that tall building all in one bound, take that step that really capitalizes on your existing skill set just within this new field. And then, of course, there's all the different ways that you can make that transition. You can go back to school, of course, realizing that you'll have these additional things you want to do while you're in school to make that transition. You could network like crazy, and my guess is that eventually in this field, some of that would mean probably volunteering, and eventually you'd impress the right people and be able to get your foot into an organization. Of course, that's going to happen more likely with a smaller organization who has a more nimble hiring process. USAID, any of those things that are more governmental, for instance, or bigger NGOs, probably have a more structured hiring process, and you'll have a harder time networking into those. Doesn't mean it's impossible, but it will be more challenging. You might find partnering organizations that allow you to do some kind of volunteering where you might work with people in these types of fields. So your church may do some kind of international work where they're partnering with USAID or some other kind of non-governmental organization to do the work. A great way to meet people, to network, and to possibly get your foot in the door through that kind of quote-unquote volunteering, even though you're not volunteering for that organization. Similarly, organizations like Rotary International, anywhere where they're doing that international work, even if they're not necessarily an NGO or consider themselves to be formally in that field. Again, you get to connect with those types of people, put some of that type of experience on your resume, and help move yourself forward. So doing your research, knowing what it is that you bring to these organizations, what it is that they're looking for, and then getting involved in the communities. How can you learn more about the field? And, as Rhonda and I were talking about on one of those, the breaks, I think the challenge in this type of work is that it doesn't happen by accident, and it takes a lot of work to get work in these areas. The good news is that it takes a lot of effort to get work in many areas. And in the areas that we are really passionate about, usually they don't come easily. So nothing new there. It's all about focus and doing the networking that you need to do, and kind of taking your knocks, if you will, or paying your dues, whatever you want to call it, to get to where you might want to be. And those of you who are young, you have many opportunities to get involved with these things through the Peace Corps and religious organizations, or other ways that you can get started in this type of work. For those of you who are mid-career, it may be a bit more challenging, and there's still plenty of opportunities there. I was talking to one of my fellow Rotarians, the Rotarians do a project in Costa Rica around education, literacy, and they were talking about a middle-aged couple who is down in Costa Rica on a Peace Corps assignment. So may take some financial planning, may take some time to get to the point where you could be able to do something like that. But if you really wanted to make it happen, the opportunities exist. So if you're interested in this type of work, or really any kind of nonprofit work, all of these techniques will be great help for you in making a transition into that kind of work. And if you have any questions or would like any assistance with making that transition, of course, please connect with Rhonda at I better look at her website and make sure I give you the right thing here. Be the Change Career Consulting, Rhonda Onstead, or you're always welcome to connect with me, Marie, Marie, at astrategicadvantage.com. And please tune in next week. We're going to be talking about another great career topic. Next week, we'll be talking to Thea, and she's been on the show before. She's coming back, which is exciting. And we'll be talking about the no fear negotiation. So Thea Kelly will be coming back to the show, to talk about the no fear negotiations. So if you've been thinking about asking for that raise at work, or you're interviewing for jobs and want to make sure you get the best benefits and pay that you can from the beginning, tune in with us next week for another great week here on the Career Confidant. And we'll see you then right here next week.
Thank you for listening to The Career Confidant. Marie Zimenoff will return again with another terrific guest next Monday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, 3 p.m. Pacific on the Voice America Business Channel. Be sure to join us then.